Okay. My name is Sara Smith-Silverman. My pronouns are she and they. I'm a professor of history at American River College, and today's date is October 25th, 2023. So let's start off by establishing the basics. What's your full name? What are your pronouns? And what's your date of birth?
My full name is Gavriel Wong, and my pronouns are he, him, and my birthday is March 15, 2002.
Tell me a little about yourself. What are your interests and hobbies? What do you like to do?
I spend a lot of time, I guess it's kind of seasonally different hobbies occupy my time just based on how their schedules work. So recently I've been teaching at high school bands since I just got done doing a national tour with a drum corps called the Sacramento Mandarins. So that's been a big part of my life recently, and for the past couple of years I've been doing that. So I play the trumpet, and I play the mellophone, and I play the French horn. And then I've started doing social media for a subgroup of the Sacramento Mandarins called Immortal Winds. So I've been taking photos for them.
You play a lot of instruments. So you said the trumpet. What was the second one?
It's like a marching French horn. It's called the mellophone.
Oh, I hadn't heard about that before. Were you in the marching band yourself when you were younger?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that how you got into this teaching?
Yeah. Well, not the schools I teach for, but I wasn't in their programs, but I went to a different school. So I guess aside from that, I also like cooking and watching shows and stuff, like normal people things.
You like cooking?
Yeah.
Anything in particular you like to cook?
I like cooking anything that my family would cook for me when I was younger. Just making sure that I don't lose those things, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any shows that you're really into right now?
I've been rewatching Naruto, so.
What is it called?
It's like an anime, Naruto. So I've been rewatching that. There's other things, but I can't really remember them off the top of my head.
So where did you grow up and where do you live now?
I grew up here in Sacramento, and I guess I grew up in South Sac, and now I live closer to Sac City. So.
And where do you currently attend college, and what do you study?
I go here at Sac City, and I study nutrition. That's been changed a couple of times, but sticking with this one. And
what made you decide to study nutrition?
I just took one nutrition class just because it filled some requirement I needed. But then I ended up finding it a lot more interesting, and this course my parents would help me pay for, so.
Oh, can you elaborate a little bit about that? So were they less into the other things that you chose to study?
They were less excited about it, I'd say. So they're very supportive with this path, so it makes it easier for me.
And what were you studying before?
I originally was studying music when I went to college, but that was 2020. And then music classes online were kind of not the best at the time. And that was at CRC too, but I'm sure it was the same everywhere. Yeah, so.
Why do you think your parents support you studying nutrition?
I think it leads to more, I wanted to say tangible, but I'm not sure if that's the right word for it. Just more clear pathways to careers than music. So I studied photography for just a semester, but my mom wasn't super excited about that one either.
Yeah, the arts can sometimes be difficult because it's hard to establish yourself with regard to a career.
Yeah, I mean, with
Not
music,
always,
I was always oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
With music, I was mainly planning to be like a band teacher at like the middle school or high school level though, but it's all right.
Is that something you would consider still? Because you could still major in nutrition.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe after I transfer out, I might double major at Sac State, but
Yeah, that makes sense to do something that you're passionate about and something that you feel like you also are interested in, but it's a little bit more practical and it gives you choices.
it's not that I don't like nutrition either. I find it interesting and I enjoy taking the classes, but it's music's just something that I grew up with. So
And what do you think you'll do with a nutrition major?
the plan is to be a clinical dietitian in a hospital somewhere.
So can you tell me, oh wait, are you a part-time student or a full-time student?
I'm a part-time student.
And why are you attending school part-time right now?
I had a hold on my account, and I wasn't able to take full-time classes. But next semester, be able to.
Why did you have a hold on your account?
I think I dropped too many classes in the spring. Yeah, and then there was an outstanding balance that I forgot to pay too. So,
But you're all set to be full-time again in the spring. So can you tell me how you identify with regard to your social identities, broadly speaking? Big question: race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, disabilities, if you have any, religion, class, and so on.
Yeah, I guess there's a lot that goes into that. I guess I identify, or I am, like a transgender man, and I'm Asian American. I'm half Chinese and half Filipino. And then what were the other ones again?
So sexual orientation, religion, disabilities if relevant, class, economic class.
Oh, I don't have any disabilities. I'd say my family's middle class, and don't really particularly identify with any religion. And sexual orientation, I never really put a label on anything because I feel like it's a very fluid thing. But typically, I've always liked girls, so.
So, in terms of your sexual orientation, do you mind elaborating on what you said? Like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I just feel like I've never been closed off to the idea of having same-sex relations with other people. I feel like it could happen. Not that it has, but I just feel like sexuality is kind of not just one or the other or anything else. I feel like it could change over time. I just feel like it's a fluid thing. Like, people change as they get older. So.
And what does it mean to you personally to identify as a trans man?
I guess I'm kind of like the textbook definition of a trans man. So I was born female and then I transitioned to male.
And then just, this is a kind of a difficult question, but I'm wondering if there's any kind of, I don't even know how I would answer my question, but what's the personal meaning to you? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to you in your life? What does it mean to you, not just intellectually and technically, but emotionally to be a trans man?
I guess emotionally there's a lot more that comes with being a trans man rather than just being a cisgender man. Can you explain that a little more?
Well, what does it, I'm trying to think how to explain it differently. I mean, I also have follow-up questions so I could just ask the follow-up questions, but I think, so my question was just like, what does it mean to you, like personally mean to you to be a trans man in your life, the importance of being a trans man in your life, their emotional resonance. I mean, I also, if there's anything, like any kind of thought that you've given to being a trans man and what it means to you, however you would define that, what that means.
I will say that having experienced life as a woman for, at this point in my life, most of my life, I feel like there's a different sense of emotional awareness that I have just from living that experience that makes my identity as a trans man very different from the life of a cis man. And I feel like that's something that is a very unique experience for me and for other trans men who have lived similar things as I have. So I feel like having that different kind of like emotional awareness and intelligence growing up with like the female standards, I guess, put on me, and then transitioning and seeing how different it is from a male's perspective is something that I feel that's, I guess, I wouldn't say super important, but it's definitely like a very unique experience that is part of my trans identity, I guess.
So you use the words emotional awareness. Is there anything in particular that comes to mind when you use those words?
I wouldn't say that it's like super binary in terms of like, oh, like people who are female are just people who are female are more emotionally aware than people who are male. I wouldn't say that's like entirely true, but I feel like when I was living as a girl, there was a lot higher sense of, I want to say like community, maybe even, or just like looking out for each other and being more in touch with how you yourself are feeling and the people around you. And I feel like guys don't just talk about that stuff as much. So
you said you use he, him pronouns, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So can you explain why it's important for you to use these pronouns?
I feel like I use he, him pronouns because that's what makes me feel most comfortable with myself.
Okay, so I have a question about coming out. Can you talk some about your coming out experience? What was the process like of figuring your identity out for yourself? And then I guess how did people, it's a big question, so how did people respond around you, at least in terms of the people that you came out to?
I feel like I've had a few different coming out experiences. One, just like me, myself, coming to terms with my own gender identity. And then along the way there, I've mentioned like I've always liked girls my whole life, and I used to live my life as a female presenting person in the past. So there's been times when I've told people, oh, I'm bisexual or things like that. So I've had a few different coming out experiences in that regard. But in terms of my like own trans identity, I feel like I've always known from a young age that I was different than all the other kids in my class or just like from other people around me, but I never had the words to like explain what the feeling was until I was like on YouTube and I saw just news clips of, what's her name, the trans woman, Jazz.
I know who you're talking about.
Jazz Jennings or something like that. I saw like news reports about her, and then I was like, whoa, that's like me, but the opposite. And then I had no idea what being trans was, but there was definitely like, that's the first time I found something and felt kind of seen. And that was about maybe like 10 years old. But up until that point, I've always felt like I was different. Like, I feel like it's not really normal for kids to think to themselves, oh, if I could just, like, if there was a button I could press that made me born as a boy and everyone else around me just, like, has the same memories of me, but I was just a boy the whole time. I never really thought, like, it never occurred to me that not all the other kids are thinking that. So, and that, I never really put that much thought into that until I was about 19. So I haven't really started transitioning until a couple years ago. I'm 21 now, so. But I guess coming out, I only really came out to my friends. I haven't really come out to my family, except for my siblings and some of my cousins. Telling my parents is kind of a big thing. But the process of coming out, I guess, it was scary. Because, I mean, there's certain friends that I know who, like, are part of the LGBTQ community. And I guess they were less scary in some aspect to come out to. But when they're still people that you've known your whole life, it's still, like, scary to tell something to them. Even though they're, like, some of my best friends. Something so, I want to say different, but I wouldn't say that I'm a completely different person from them either. But I guess something so vulnerable about myself, it was difficult to tell. Especially when they've seen me a certain way my whole life. But yeah.
So you sort of do that you were trans in some way anyway from a very young age, but then you didn't start coming out until you're around 19? Is that, when you say coming out at 19 to people, was that to yourself as well, specifically as a trans man, or are you talking about the coming out to just people around you and starting the transition process?
I guess I've always known, but I will say that I felt like going through all of my public school life, that just felt like something like, oh, I'm just gonna like take this to my grave. No one will know, and I'll just be fine with it, since I know there's lots of like trans people and lots of trans stories that I guess are like the most popular ones that are like, oh, I'm like, I won't be able to live this way, like at their assigned gender when they were born their whole life, and they would ultimately like, unalive themselves because of that. I feel like in that regard, I had never had that extreme kind of dysphoria about me being born female. Obviously, there was a lot, but it would never got to that extreme point when I was like thinking of taking my own life because of it. I think when I came out, it was more not so much because I hated who I was before. It's because I came out. Well, let me start that sentence over. I came out more because I respected myself too much to not. And that was something growing, not just respecting myself in my gender identity. It was just, I guess, me growing up a little more and realizing that I am someone who deserves to be happy too. So, I think that was kind of a tangent from your question, though.
Oh, no, it was fine. So when you say that you're not out to family, can you elaborate? Why is that, and how do you relate to them?
My family is just very, I would say, traditional in that regard. I don't think that they're unaware that trans people exist, for sure, but I guess it's hard to get a read on how they would react and what kind of stress that would cause my family, especially with they're very much more occupied on other things that are way more important than this. Well, that I view personally as way more important. Not saying that I'm not important. I think there's just other things in my family that I would rather have them focus on right now than me. So, and I don't want me coming out to stress my family out either. So, I feel like they can tell. I mean, I've been on hormone therapy for over a year and I look the way that I do. So, I rarely get like misgendered anymore, or I walk around and people just think I'm any other guy nowadays. Well, because I am, but yeah, it's just
you must get misgendered by your family, though, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So do you think there's an element of sort of like knowing but just not talking about it?
Yeah, I feel like that is prevalent in Asian households with any topic that's not something that's, I don't know, normal, I guess. Like, we don't really talk about like mental health, or we don't really talk about gender identity. We don't talk about sexual orientation. Those are just things that we don't talk about. That's just how it is, I guess, you know.
Do you mind if I ask, like, how does it make you feel to be misgendered by your family? I know they don't technically know because you haven't explicitly come out to them, but how does it make you feel still to be misgendered? And do you have, how does it feel as well to sort of feel like you're holding on to this information? Like you're not telling them, at least right now. Does it create some distance, or just, yeah, how does it make you feel in general?
When I was living at my parents' house still, it was really difficult because I would go anywhere else. And then this was also recent to, well, in like the timeline of my life, this is more recent when I was living with them to me coming out rather than now. So when I was first coming out, it was really difficult too, because I would go and see my friends or anyone else, or I'd go to school and then I'd be me, and then I'd go home, and then I'm being pulled back into that life again, which isn't something that I wanted, I guess. So it was kind of like having to flip a switch when I would go home every day But since moving out of my parents' house, it's been a lot better. I get to be me all the time and never have to deal with it as much either. I guess when it was new, it sucked more, but having come out and living my life this way for a long time now, or a long time, it's been a lot better. Obviously, it still sucks when I go home and still get misgendered, but um, it's not the most frustrating thing either. So, especially because it doesn't happen, it's not like constantly all day anymore. So, having that separation helps.
Do you ever hesitate to go home because you feel like you have to sort of play a part a little bit?
I don't hesitate to go home. I will say I'd never feel my parents, though I don't think they'd be happy entirely of me existing the way I do. I will say they've never made me feel unsafe there. So I never hesitate as well. Maybe I did when I was first coming out. I would want to be away from home as much as possible. But since moving out of their house, I haven't really hesitated to go home since. I have no doubt that they love me, so I never feel that. It's more just like I don't want to disappoint them. So
where do you think you found the most affirmation and support as you came out and even currently?
definitely within my friends. They supported me a lot through me going to like gender therapy, through me picking my name, through everything that came when I came out and everything before and after. They definitely been my main pillars of support.
Do you have a queer friend group, or is that more mixed?
I have a pretty diverse friend group, but I guess the ones that I do talk to about my gender kind of stuff, those are generally my LGBT friends.
So backing up a step, I wanted to ask this question. So you've touched on this some, but if you can elaborate, if possible, how would you distinguish trans masculinity from cis masculinity, or the trans masculine experience from the cis masculine experience?
I feel like there's a lot of overlap, but there's also a lot of differences. I mean, obviously, I transitioned because I wanted to. I did like identify more with how I viewed masculine people around me, and they're pretty much all cis masculine people. So there's definitely overlap in terms of that, but I feel like as a trans masculine person, it's, I guess, one of my main things, I guess, how I view my own masculinity is like seeing what the toxic masculinity stereotype kind of is and being masculine in a way that's opposite of that. Like to use any kind of dominance that I have now as a male person in a nonviolent and kind way. So that's more so how I view my own masculinity than my trans experiences versus cis masculine experience. I feel like, yeah.
What has been your experience around cis men? Have you been surprised by anything? Have you been disheartened by anything?
There's a different sense of camaraderie that I get now around cis men than I did before. I will say that they allow themselves to say a lot grosser things about other people, especially female people, than I expected, I guess. When I was doing drum corps in the past, this past summer even, this was one of the first years. I've been doing drum corps for about 5 years, and this past summer was the first year that I fully presented as masculine and used the same bathrooms and all of that stuff. So I was in a shared space with them in like the bathroom and all of that. And
so you were saying, was there anything else you wanted to say on that topic about your experience around cis men and what it's been like in the last year?
no, I guess that's just kind of it. I feel like they don't realize how impactful what they say is sometimes. And I mean, it's not just them. I feel like me as a man now too, I have to hold myself to the same standard, obviously, because not everyone obviously knows I'm a trans man, and that shouldn't be any source of validation for me to say, like, or to be the way that I am, I guess, or to say mean things either, because I've lived those experiences. But I feel like a lot of cis men don't realize how they can come off to other people as, like, I feel like they don't realize how scary that they can be to a female perspective sometimes, and how much what they say can impact someone's life too. There was something I was talking about with one of my friends in the summer too, about, I can't remember what prompted the topic. They were talking about some topic that was kind of similar to this, and my friend, she was a girl, so, and drum corps is like a predominantly male space, and there's not a lot of girls in the activity, especially in the brass section. It's predominantly guys. Like, there's 70 something of us, and I think there was about 9 girls in the horn line. So there was 9 girls who played brass instruments out of 70 something of us. And I guess being in that space is very emotionally taxing when you're a minority in a space that's almost like created for men. And she was really frustrated about something that kind of had to do with that, and how, I guess, well, in her words, like, dumb guys can be, which is like true to an extent for a generalization, I guess. But and then she was saying something like how some guys need like training on how to talk to women or people, and then one of my friends, he was like, I mean, he's more in tune with I guess, how to treat people. And then he was saying like, oh, I don't need training. But she was like, yes, you do. And then she was like, the only person who doesn't really is Gav. And I was like, I see what she meant by that, but I feel like the farther I am from, like, in time, the farther I am from when I came out, I don't live those experiences anymore. And I don't get treated like a female person anymore. So I don't live those same things every day anymore like I used to when I was a female person. So I feel like there's some kind of overlap with masculinity in that aspect, but I feel like we should hold all men accountable to the same kinds of things.
Yeah, because your privilege as somebody who's masculine can feel more normalized, and you become more assimilated into masculine culture over time, and the greater distance there is between your experience with that privilege and your experience with sort of sexism, right? Like, you can see how that distance sort of can become problematic. It's kind of like a class-based experience. If you have money later in life, but you were very, very poor when you were younger, it doesn't mean that you currently really understand what it means to be poor.
Yeah, that's what I was basically trying to say to her when we're having that conversation. I guess when she does like complain, not like complain, but like tell me about like the struggles that she was going through, then I was able to empathize maybe better than like a cis man could, but it's not that I go through the same things anymore.
And then it could be can become a problem if you think that you don't need the training or you don't need the education around the way that masculinity can become toxic because you have this experience of being a trans man. If you start to think that you're kind of that you're not in that, you're just sort of, it's not necessary for you, then, I don't know what I'm trying to say. It could be.
No, I totally get it.
Yeah.
I feel like we should all always be, like checking ourselves and making sure that we're, just being open to everyone around us, you know what I mean? And their experiences and seeing where you are, like where you fall in that. So,
has your experience around cis men, has there been anything refreshing about, or like surprising in a good way about how they tend to talk or act?
I guess when I was younger, I guess before, like in elementary school, before there was more of a divide and a separation between how different like boys and girls really are, or before there was like more emphasis on a social level, I guess. When I was younger, the guys in elementary school, I would always, like, I was friends with all guys growing up, and they just treated me like anyone else before I guess we were entirely aware of, or before, like, I guess aware is the right word, of like the social differences that got placed on us later in life. And transitioning, I feel like I've kind of gone back to that with other guys and how they treat me and stuff like that. Because before, I felt more of a separation existing as a female person around cis men, but now it's more like I guess they have like a sense of brotherhood that I get included in now.
Is there any emotional vulnerability that exists in that kind of sense of brotherhood?
Um, it's different with different people, obviously. And I'd say, like, if you're closer friends with someone, then that can definitely exist. But if it's just anyone, then it's not entirely there. And I know, well, this is just like my female experience. Maybe it's because I was obviously like a man, like in my head. But I feel like I was kind of like that too. I wasn't really vulnerable with anyone. It had to be like someone I was close to. But I do know other um, female people that can be vulnerable to anyone, and that's, you know, just how they are.
So, what does it feel like emotionally to figure out your identity? Do you feel happy and even empowered in your identity?
Yeah, I would say I feel happy about it. Yes, it's more just like a normal part of who I am. I guess I wouldn't equate like a large sense of happiness. I would say it's more like a relief, I guess, to exist the way I do, and for it to be okay and normal. Um, I guess there's a sense of empowerment that came when I first came out, but since then, I guess it's kind of mellowed out. But I'm sure it'll come back again when rolls around.
Which kind of leads me to the next question. Where do you find queer joy?
I guess like mainly recently it's been in like representation. I guess I find a lot of queer joy. Like I can see it existing in the real world a lot more than it exists um, in media of any kind, I guess. So I guess what would make me happier would be to see more representation of people like me in movies or shows or anything like that.
And when you say people like me, can you elaborate? Like what kind of representation do you want to see?
I do feel like trans men kind of are one of the most overlooked people in the LGBT community. I almost feel like this kind of goes back to like your cis masculine question too, because I feel like a lot of the LGBT community is kind of views masculinity and maleness as almost evil in a way, or like the enemy. So, but like before coming out, I was always like, why do I feel like I should have been born that way? Like one of these people when they're like evil, so to speak. So I feel like there's you kind of trans men kind of get overlooked in a lot of LGBT spaces, even though those are spaces that are supposed to be for all of us. But I feel like sometimes more so than others, like trans women are more celebrated as like escaping that kind of evil masculinity and not being tied down to that anymore. But they're like, why would you transition to be male when, you know?
Anything else you want to say about representation? Thinking about like we don't really see much Asian American queer representation in the movies, and I can't think of an example of somebody who's transmasculine and Asian American.
Yeah, I
At
feel
least
like
in the U.S. media, I guess.
the only trans masculine Asian person on that I know is like Cello Man and just on YouTube, but I can't really think of that many others.
Oh, there's the L word, the Q generation. I forget what his name is, the actor.
But yeah, I feel like Asian representation in all of LGBTQ existence is already on the lower side in general, outside of trans men. So
so anything else you want to say about that? The next question is on religion.
I don't really have anything else on that.
Okay. So I know you said you're not really religious right now, but did religion play a role in your life growing up?
Oh yeah, my mom she was Catholic before moving to America. She almost even didn't move with the rest of her family because she wanted to stay in the Philippines and be a nun. But that didn't happen, obviously. And then my dad grew up like, I'm not sure what the branch is called. It's like non-denominational Christian, kind of just like a general kind of Christianity. And then they raised me in that kind of church, even though I feel like my mom kind of had some underlying like Catholic values while not going to like a Catholic church anymore though. But yeah, they did raise me in the church, and I feel like that played a big part in my life. Not in terms of like being religious and feeling like I need to spread the word or anything, but I resonated a lot with the aspect of like family within the church and with just being nice to people. Those were my main takeaways and why I enjoyed it when I was younger. Yeah, I always just liked the idea that we should treat everyone like with kindness and stuff. But later in my life, the church led to not do those things for people like me, so I kind of stopped participating.
You think your decision not to participate had to do with the way that the church can promulgate transphobic and homophobic ideas?
Yeah, for sure. I also, outside of that, I kind of just don't know how much I really believe what was written in the book is actually real. Outside of treating LGBTQ people like poorly,
Are you talking mainly about the Catholic Church right now, or both the Christian non-denominational church or the non-denominational Christianity that your father believes in?
Kind of both. I know some non-denominational churches are more open to LGBTQ identities, but it's kind of like they're very picky and choosy, so I don't really feel like any of that stuff is helping me in any way, so I just don't really mess with it anymore.
Do you think religion might play a role in, like, if you came out to your family, how they would react? Is that part of your calculation?
A little bit more so on my mom's side. They're more like hardcore Catholics, and my grandma, she's just on my dad's side, she's just like old and traditional Chinese. She doesn't really speak English that well either, so it'd kind of be hard to explain to her. Especially because my family didn't raise me learning any of our languages, so it's hard to communicate with the older people in my family.
So anything else about religion that you feel like is important to say about its influence on your life and in the present day?
No, I just wish that I kind of had more of a opportunity myself to explore religion instead of being forced into it in a way. Because, I mean, like when you're a kid and you just grow up, that's all you know. You think that's the right thing, and because it's the only thing you know. So I wish that I had more of a self exploration kind of aspect with my own journey in religion, even though I know it's not really how it is for a lot of people. But yeah, it must have been like so annoying when I was growing up because I was like, everyone needs to do this because that's what I do. And I didn't realize that, I was just really unaware of non-religious people and their reasons for being non-religious, or other religions and their like cultural significance and value in their own lives, and other things. I just wish that I wasn't raised so oblivious to all of that. But yeah, that's about all I have to say for religion.
Okay, so the next section is about disability, neurodiversity, and mental health. I know you said you don't have any disabilities. Do you have any, are you neurodivergent in any way? Do you have any mental health issues that you feel comfortable talking about?
I'm not neurodivergent in any way that I'm aware of. I don't have any disabilities. I've been diagnosed with gender dysphoria, if that counts. I mean, there's different like mental health struggles that come with being a trans man, I guess, or just being LGBTQ in any way, and different mental health struggles that come with being an Asian American also, or being part of like an immigrant family, being raised Asian American. So I feel like we all have our own kind of struggles and stuff, mental health wise.
Do you feel comfortable elaborating like about what do you mean when you say, coming from an immigrant family, Asian American family, and also being a part of the queer and trans community? Like what mental health issues do you think you've experienced based on your own background, your identities?
I feel like there's a lot of expectations placed on like Asian Americans to assimilate as much as they can with whiteness in order to be like successful. There's like a whole bunch. I'm sure people have heard like the model minority myth and falling into that, and all of that kind of expectations that are placed on Asian Americans. It's all super real, and it's definitely things that I've had to deal with. I've always felt like I needed to be in the gifted kids class. I need to take all the APs. I need to take the hardest classes, and I need to do the best in them. And when I couldn't, there was a point in high school when I was taking on way too much. It felt like the world was ending. I'm not sure if it's just because I was a teenager and everything feels 10 times more than it actually is, but there's definitely a different kind of weight that I felt getting like a D in a class than some of my white friends would feel. But In terms of like my transness and mental health, I feel like, I don't know, there's just different struggles that I would go through, or people like me go through, that just people don't think about on a daily basis, that I guess they'd be super unaware of since they don't think about them. So,
What does, I mean, you talked a little bit about what it feels like to have the expectations surrounding the model minority myth, kind of how those expectations have impacted you in school. Is there anything else you want to say about that? Like, is there anything you care to elaborate upon, like what that experience was like in high school and what it's been like in college, like sort of dealing with those expectations?
well, I guess I wasn't super aware of them in high school, so it was a lot tougher. But after lots of people like talking about them and me being more educated on them, and me just being more aware of how Asian Americans like exist in the world, I feel like I'm a lot more comfortable with my identity, and I feel a lot more, I guess, support with these things being like called out on and said, and I'm able to navigate my frustrations and like and my feelings a lot better now that I know where they're coming from. So I guess me in high school didn't really realize a lot of these things and why I felt the way I did, and now that I do, it's a lot easier to navigate and overcome these kind of feelings and frustrations.
So you're Chinese and you're Filipino. Do you feel like the kind of stereotype and the expectations that you've experienced, is that complicated at all by the fact that you're both Chinese and Filipino?
In a way, I feel like if I was full Chinese, I'd be treated very differently, and if I was full Filipino, I'd be treated very differently. I feel like within like Asian communities in general, there's like a big difference on how we treat like Southeast Asians versus everyone else kind of Asians. So like I know when I go to like things that are like predominantly like Filipino cultural things, and then I'll be like, oh, I'm half Chinese and half Filipino, they put a lot of value in me being half Chinese. And when I go to things that are like predominantly Chinese cultural things, they kind of do the opposite and kind of devalue that half Filipino part. So there's very big cultural differences within like Asian communities on how we view each other too. So that's something that I've had to deal with.
And where do you think that comes from? Like, why is that?
There's definitely like a colorism aspect of it. Even my mom, when I would go do drum corps in the summer, we're like outside all day, every single day for the entire summer. So it'd get really dark, and I would come home and she'd be like, "Oh my gosh, you're so dark. What happened?" So, yeah, there's things like that. There's, I guess, even looking at like the wealth standpoint between China and the Philippines, you can see where there's a large difference there. Aside from like those cultural things too.
So you mentioned gender dysphoria. Is there anything else you want to say about that? How receiving that diagnosis impacted you? What it feels like emotionally? Anything about that?
it wasn't really a big thing. I feel like going into gender therapy, I knew, and I was just waiting for someone else to tell me. I mean, to be honest, in that point of my life, I was super ready to move on from me identifying as female and wanting to move on, but I wanted to have more of an excuse that's someone else telling me that I should do it besides myself. I think I was kind of looking for that in gender therapy. So I'd be like, oh, my therapist says I have this. I mean, I'd known even before starting gender therapy that, but I guess I just wanted to downplay it a little more when coming out. I think that's just how I was, who I am, how I wanted to do it. But it wasn't like a surprise or anything, getting diagnosed with gender dysphoria or anything. It was partly to help me like soft come out to people, and it was also more looking down the lines. I needed a diagnosis and a letter from a therapist in order to get top surgery, in order to start hormones, and in the future give bottom surgery, all that stuff. So
did they put you through, like, how long did you have to see a gender therapist before you could get access to the kind of hormones and other medical procedures that you want?
For hormones, I think you only need a letter, at least with my insurance, you only need a letter from a gender therapist saying that you have this diagnosis and that this will benefit you. And for top surgery, I think my insurance requires 6 months, and I think they recently removed the requirement that you need to be on hormones for a year.
Okay, anything else you want to say about that? Especially if there's anything to say about how it's impacted your education or your performance in the classroom?
I will say something I've been dealing with recently is that post-surgery depression is pretty real. I had top surgery almost 6 weeks ago now, almost. And I was doing super well in my classes before then. I was on top of everything. And I didn't realize how bedridden and difficult doing everything would be after surgery. And getting back on track in my classes is something that I've been struggling with recently.
Is the depression rooted in the sort of the physical recovery, or is there some emotional kind of consequence for you?
I'd say they kind of go hand in hand. I mean, being able to do anything and then having such a major surgery like that, and then just not being able to do anything for yourself, and then yeah, it's kind of both, I guess, are what led to this point.
Have you been able to talk to your professors about your need for accommodations, for extensions?
I have. They've been pretty accommodating for the most part. There's one class that I feel like maybe I should just drop it at this point, since that's the class that I've not been able to get back on track with recently, but that's also on my part. I haven't reached out since like 2 weeks after my surgery, so there's that I need to do too.
So when you talk to your faculty about the need for extensions on your work, or just to explain what's going on with you, have you felt like you could, like, how specific do you get, or how comfortable do you feel like, what do you feel comfortable telling them?
I normally just say that I needed to have a surgery, but I do feel like a sense of guilt about having the surgery and having to ask for extensions. I'm not sure if everyone always feels that way, but I always feel super guilty about it because I'm like, oh, I could have scheduled this surgery for a different time or something. But there's that aspect of it. But I mean, I don't know. I guess there's always, I could have scheduled it at a different time, but then again, it's kind of like, could I actually have with everyone's schedules and everything? It's always, and I've been waiting like a long time to get the surgery too. So
Yeah, I'm sure you were excited to get it.
mm-hmm.
So to have to postpone doesn't seem like ideal.
Yeah. I mean, especially it was super frustrating. I was supposed to get it in in May of last year, and then my insurance was being super difficult and having all this, they needed all this other stuff from me that didn't initially say. It was a whole thing. So then I was originally supposed to get it way earlier this year, and then I've had to wait a while, but I've already been on a waiting list for over a year up until that point too. So
oh yeah, that's a long wait.
Mm-hmm.
Are there just not that many providers?
It's more like locationally where they are, their availabilities, their schedules. Like certain surgeons are way more booked out than others. So
are there as many surgeons as there should be who specialize in top surgeries?
I feel like top surgery is becoming more and more accessible as we go on, but it kind of depends. Like the surgeon I went with technically wasn't like in network with my insurance or whatever, so then there's a whole process of getting approval from my doctor and getting recommendation letters and saying that, oh, this need to go to this person, and claiming that all this stuff will be medically necessary. And it's difficult because a lot of insurance classifies top surgery as a cosmetic surgery and not a medically necessary surgery for certain areas of tissue removal. So it's difficult, but it's very possible within a lot of people's insurance if they're willing to go through all of that.
They make you jump through some hoops.
Mm-hmm.
That's frustrating.
Yeah, it's whatever though, I guess.
Okay, so just looking at the time, want to get to the education section in a few minutes, but I have a couple of questions before that. So we talked about, or you talked about, being Asian American, Filipino, and Chinese. So have you ever experienced, to your knowledge, I know it can be hard to know, but discrimination, harassment, or bias based on your racial and ethnic identity?
There's definitely been some. It hasn't. I feel like a lot of like racism towards Asian Americans gets downplayed a lot, and I guess that's something growing up with how downplayed it is. I wasn't really sure of what it was before, but there's definitely been like, I have like weird lines. Sure, I have like just like people making fun of, like Asian eyes or things like that. It was definitely more straightforward and prevalent kind of not okay things when I was younger, but they were like okay back then. More recently, I've found a greater sense of like community within Asian groups, I guess. Like, sometimes I'm part of like the API thing at Sac City, so there's that sense of like Asian community here. but also just typically the friend groups I gravitate towards are more Asian or like brown people. So I don't really get that from them that much, but there's definitely um, things that I've experienced in the past, like when I was in high school. Looking back on, I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. But yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to always be aware of what's happening, and then when you're older, you can reflect back.
Mm-hmm.
And also, a lot of ways that people are prejudiced. It's not often explicit, right? So it's hard to tell why something's happening or what's happening exactly sometimes.
Yeah, I remember when I was in high school, there was this girl I used to be friends with, and I was talking about how like frustrating it is that my parents didn't teach me any of their native languages, so I can't really talk to some of the people in my family that well, and I can't like communicate with them or anything. And she was like, "No, I get it. My mom and my aunt, they both know ASL. Like they both know sign language. So sometimes they just sign at each other, and I have no idea what they're saying." And I was just like, "Well, I mean, I guess I didn't really. I don't know. Just I don't know. Kind of downplayed what I was trying to talk about there."
So what was your experience? You said you're from an immigrant family. One of your parents, right, is immigrated. Who was that? Your mom?
Yeah, my mom.
Oh, your mom. And then your grandparents were immigrants or two, or?
Yeah, on my dad's side, on my Chinese side, my grandma and grandpa moved from China here.
So how do you think being from an immigrant family has shaped your life growing up, and also just your perspective towards the world? Very big question.
I feel like this kind of sense that I need to work twice as hard as everyone else around me who's not from an immigrant family. And there's also this kind of sense of responsibility to do that and be successful, to give back to what my parents and grandparents sacrificed for me to be here. Yeah, there's definitely that sense. I know that I'm not like forced to give back to them for anything that they've done, but there's definitely I want to do that for them. So I don't want to get those things confused.
Do you feel a sense of connection to where your parents are from, or where your parents and your grandparents are from? Like, have you ever been able to visit people or travel to the Philippines or to China?
No, it's like really expensive for one, and it's getting more difficult, especially for like my Chinese side, to go to China because my grandma's getting older and she's probably like the one who would be like the main navigator and be able to show us things there. It would be difficult for my dad even because he only speaks like the certain dialect of Cantonese that my grandpa's village was speaking, and my dad would always tell me it's like known as like the poor man's language in China, which I don't really know anything about actually, so which is pretty unfortunate. But so even in the sense that my dad can speak Chinese with my grandma, he wouldn't really be able to speak to anyone actually in China since they don't really speak that language anymore. Can you repeat the question again? I was going to say something else.
Like having a connection to the Philippines as well. Because your mom is first generation, do you still have family in the Philippines? Does she have family?
Oh yeah, they have family in the Philippines. I'm very unaware of my family in the Philippines. A lot of it's on my grandpa's siblings that I just don't know anything about. I'm not even sure if my mom knows anything about them. But all of my grandma's siblings, they worked really hard to move all of them here. So um, I'm very aware of all of my mom's mom's side of the family that's here. Very unaware of my grandpa's siblings and where they are and if they're even alive or any of that. But I will say that I have a very obviously, but very Asian American experience and not like it's just very different from like mainland experiences, I guess. There's a lot of discourse within the Filipino community, online at least, between whether like Filipino Americans and Filipinos, like if Filipino Americans are like really Filipino. There's definitely a lot of that stuff, but I can't really speak to how it is on the Chinese side because I guess a lot of that kind of media doesn't pop up on my feed as much as it does for Filipino people, I guess.
So, do you think your experiences as Asian American are shaped by your queerness, and then also your experience as somebody who's queer? How do you think those experiences are shaped by being Asian American?
I feel like there's a lot more of not talking about queerness in Asian American households and like lifestyle than there is in anywhere else. So I feel like my transness, I almost view that as more of an American part of me because that's just not something that we talk about that much in like Asian culture, I guess. I feel like when I look at Filipino media, the only LGBTQ representation is gay men. I feel like there's definitely like predominant like there's a lot of Filipino celebrities that are openly gay men or like drag queens and all that stuff, but I have yet to see anyone in Filipino media who's trans female to male or even there's not that much like lesbian representation in media like that either. So
Why do you think that is, that lack of representation?
I don't know. I guess you can always look at it from like a patriarchal standpoint that men are just more prominent. And sometimes, I guess that could go for gay men too. They still have male privilege and all that. So,
Do you think, is there a way that like gay men and drag queens are represented in the media, Filipino media? Is that problematic at all? Like, are stereotypes prevalent?
oh, they're very stereotypical with like a flamboyant kind of attitude in gay Filipino media, but a lot of the times, I mean, obviously, it's not like entirely true. It's not how every gay man is, but I guess there's always some kind of reason behind why a stereotype exists. So I feel like a lot of the gay Filipino men I meet tend to be that way too, but I'm not sure if it's just because that's how they think they should be, because that's what their representation looks like, or anything like that. It's definitely not like all of them, but there's definitely a good amount.
I think that's also, I think in U.S. culture, there's a tendency to view kind of marginalized groups through this entertainment lens. Like, you're good for my entertainment. but not with regard to having equal rights in our society.
Yeah.
And that can apply across different different marginalized groups, the experience of different marginalized groups, right? So, and then I think looking at early sort of how queerness was represented in U.S. media, not that long ago, and even still to the present day to some extent, right? It's like, yeah, more gay men are represented, but often through stereotypes, and only the gay men who are stereotypically flamboyant, right? Or like, if you can be entertaining, then we want you in our media.
Yeah.
If you can entertain straight cis people.
Yeah, that's super real. Yes. I was thinking the same thing, but you're put into words better than I did.
This might be, I'm talking too much. Okay. I'm sure there's more to say there, but is there anything else you want to say? The next question, I do want to ask a question about class before asking more questions about education.
I'm okay to move on.
Okay. So with regard to your class, you said you're middle class. What do you mean when you say that you're middle class? Why do you say middle class?
Kind of just like where the bracket falls. I know middle class is a very broad thing. There's, I guess just based on numbers of what my parents make, they've always defined it as that. So,
what do they do for a living?
My dad, he helps my aunt run the family business that my grandpa started. It's like a promotional advertising product, so they print on things and like the middleman between suppliers and printers to companies. And then my mom, she was a nurse at Sutter for a while, like 20 something years, and now she works for the state and is a nurse still.
Was she trained as a nurse in the Philippines?
No. She moved when she was 18. So she did all of her college kind of things here. She went to Sac City, actually.
Are you a only child, or do you have siblings?
I have siblings.
Oh, how many siblings? Two?
I have an older brother who's also LGBT identifying, and I have a younger sister.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
Keep trying to tell my siblings that you might be gay. Don't. No, it hasn't stuck so far. And other family members, don't count it out. Okay, and you work, right? You said you work for the the marching band.
Yeah, that's more of like a passion project than a job. But when I see questions like, "Do I work?" It's like, yes, but do I get a lot of money for it? No.
How much? Do you mind me asking how much you make?
For the whole fall season for Laguna Creek High School, I get paid $1,300
For the whole season?
Yeah.
Oh, so you're not paid on an hourly basis?
No. There's some other schools, like the school that my brother teaches at, and some of my other friends, they get paid on an hourly basis, albeit super bad rates, like worse than McDonald's, you know what I mean? So taking at high school bands is for sure a passion project, but it's something that is important to me, part of like a where I made all of my friends in high school, so I don't mind giving back to those causes. Something I enjoy too. But
so how many hours do you think? I mean, I guess you work seasonally, but are you like right now? Are you?
Oh yeah,
spending time doing that.
It would be like 3 hours on Monday, an extra hour on Thursdays, and then when it's not a competition day, they do 9 to 5 rehearsal on Saturdays. When it's a competition day, that goes from 9 until however late at night it goes. So they practice for 3 hours. They drive there.
How long is your season?
They start practicing in August when school starts, but they also have like a band camp and rehearsals throughout the summer, which I can't go to in the summer when I was away. But from August up through mid-November. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, it's not a lot of money for a lot of time.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say longer.
No.
And then, does the season repeat itself in the spring, or are you just that's only once a year?
It's a once a year thing. Do fall band, and then they have winter things for the color guard members and percussionists. But I teach at 2 high schools, so.
Does the marching band though during like football season are they out on the field?
Oh yeah, they go out on the field and they do like halftime and they do all that stuff, like play in the stands. But mainly it's their competitions that I'm there to help them with and help them with their marching technique or their playing and stuff like that.
So you don't have that much money coming in from working with a marching band.
No.
How do you pay for rent?
I just live with my grandma. She just lets me stay with her.
Oh, okay.
It's like we have a thing where it's like as long as I'm in school, she'll let me live there.
Okay, so when you say you moved out, you moved in with your grandmother.
Yeah, she has a separate, like she has her house and there's like a little, it's kind of like apartment sized in her backyard, where she used to, when she had family moving in from China, she would let them stay there. If she knew someone. There's like I guess this ties back into like Asian, like American kind of culture. It's kind of like when you know someone, like you see someone like you, just help them out because you know what struggles they go through, to how taxing it is to move from where you're from to here. So she would let people stay there in her backyard. Nice. And now I live there.
Is it a studio?
Yeah, it's got like it's got 2 rooms, just like a bed, well, like 3 if you count the bathroom. It's got like a bedroom, a little living space that has a kitchen in it, and a bathroom.
So I guess this seems like an important question. Do financial stressors ever make it difficult to concentrate on your coursework or to get by?
Mainly my only expense is groceries. And sometimes it's stressful, but it's more stressful in the sense that when I used to work like a lot of other part-time jobs leading up to now. The only reason I don't have one now is because I think I just interviewed at the wrong time, and I was like, oh, I'm going to do this interview, but I'm also going to get surgery, so I'll be gone for 6 weeks, and I teach high school band, so I'm not available any Saturday until after November. But I'll probably go back to Starbucks after marching season's done. But I had enough saved up where I can exist like that for up until I can get a part-time job again. I think the most stressful part is just seeing all of my savings disappear every time I get groceries. But it's not something that I've had to stress out about as much as like a lot of other people have had to. So I'm very grateful in that sense.
So you worked at Starbucks?
I worked at Starbucks and I worked at McDonald's in the past. And I worked at Costco in the past too.
So I haven't heard about Costco and McDonald's being queer. Maybe they are, but I thought Starbucks was pretty queer. No. Is that true? Or no? Maybe not your store?
Maybe not my store, but like in a sense that they're very queer friendly. There's definitely been lots of LGBT baristas, but I don't think the majority of my store was. There's definitely like one of the shift supervisors, a couple of my coworkers. Wasn't an overwhelming amount though.
Okay. So. I guess one final question, which I know you've had multiple jobs, but what has it been like for you being queer at work? Just very general question, and then maybe you could think about whether or not you under what circumstances you're out at work, if you are out at work, but also just like, what is it like being queer at work?
It was definitely worse at McDonald's and definitely worse at Costco. I just feel like they don't realize, at least at Costco, it felt more like they didn't realize what they are saying could not be the most appropriate thing. And then at McDonald's, they kind of treat it how I expect my family would treat it when they come out, because it was kind of like saying things like, "Oh, you're gonna have to bear with me because I knew you had this name before, so it's gonna be difficult for me." And it's like, yes, it'll be difficult for you. It's difficult for me too, you know. Just saying things like that is my experience more at McDonald's, but that's because I worked at that store and then I left and then I came back in order to pay for drum corps and things like that, like paying for traveling and stuff. So, it's a very different experience. Maybe it would have been the same at Costco if they knew me before my transition, because I only worked at Costco post transitioning. So, my experience there was more just like, "Oh, can you put your real name on that instead?" And I was like, "Oh, this is my real name." But it was just like small things like that. It was never misgendering or anything like that. It was just like, I don't think they were aware of the language that they were using.
So just not, they didn't really, had kind of a very superficial understanding.
Yeah, I don't think they ever meant it in a harmful way. It was kind of like, they didn't realize like what language could make people uncomfortable or anything else like that. So it was looking back, I probably should have said more just in case they have another employee like me that comes in or stuff like that. But it's okay.
Well, it's hard also to be alone and to think that you are so like responsible as an individual to make people, to inform people, to educate people, you know.
Yeah.
Especially because there's a toll that takes on you by doing that. There's power in numbers. It's nice if there are other. Did you ever have other queer coworkers that made you feel more comfortable?
I had a coworker who was a gay man at Costco. We weren't super close. We just worked the same shifts, and yeah.
Okay, so what about being out at this point in your life? Do you under what circumstances do you feel like you come out, or you're out, or do you feel the need to be out as trans and queer?
I guess I would describe myself more to people as what lots of trans people like call stealth. So, I exist in that kind of realm in my everyday life. Normally, I don't really feel the need to disclose my transness to anyone, unless they're like a doctor or my employer, and I don't have my name legally changed yet or things like that. But I never really feel the need to come out to people on a daily basis. So.
Okay, so I do want to ask some questions about education. So what was it like in high school being queer?
Well, in high school I didn't identify as trans, but I was still a female presenting person who liked girls. It wasn't that big of a deal, especially in band. There's a lot of, I guess, arts kind of attracts a lot of people that are LGBT in some way. So, and a lot of my friend group and the social aspect of a lot of the people I spent time with, it was never really that big of a deal. It's more of a home thing. I didn't really care. I'm sure there's definitely in like some of my other classes, people would say things that aren't LGBT friendly and stuff, but they kind of just sounded dumb to me. So
Did you have representation in faculty? Were there queer trans faculty?
um,
I guess teachers.
openly, not really. Suspicions always would arise with the students though. So
Kind of interesting to me. At the start of this project, I expected there to be more open teachers, more staff that were open and then or public about their identities, at least. Yeah. And I also expected just sort of the environment. I mean, students haven't talked about it being very hostile, but I also expected it to be a little bit more inclusive.
yeah, I feel like representation, like with my teachers, would have been huge in high school. Even just so much as putting out a flag, even if they're not, you know. Were you like planning to interview like teachers too or something? Or
Well, I've just been interviewing students. I don't think I'll interview high school teachers. If I have the capacity, I may interview faculty, maybe staff. But right now I've been so focused on students,
Yeah, that makes sense.
limited capacity. And I keep interviewing more and more students. I want to ensure that there's good representation in who I'm interviewing too.
That's good.
So were any of your classes queer or trans inclusive?
I would take inclusive lightly. There was never like open discrimination against it, and there was never like actually I will say there was one teacher who had these policies for his class printed on the board and that he went over very intently about like respect all identities and all people in this class, and he always had them printed out around the entryway of his door, and he would go over them at the start of every new year. It was my Latin teacher in high school.
Latin.
Yeah. But it was kind of like in all the other classes, it was like they are like inclusive, but they don't really like talk that much about it even. It's just like if it comes up, then mention it. I feel like maybe my English teacher in 12th grade had maybe a little talk about it. And then, but there isn't really a lot of inclusive representation kind of things in my classes in high school.
So generally the curriculum wasn't very inclusive of queer and trans people's experiences?
Not really. I think in 11th grade and I took AP US History, I think we talked about Stonewall riots a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say, how much depth did you go into around the Stonewall riots?
It wasn't that much, but I think that's because he was following the AP structure and rubric that we needed to do all this by a certain time. We also started school later since I was in Sac City Unified School District. And they start early September instead of August. So you have about a month less of teaching time that we needed to get through.
What about Asian American inclusion in the curriculum? Did any of your classes include Asian American experience?
In elementary school, I went to it was kind of like an Asian school, I guess. It's called Matsuyama Elementary School. It's in South Sac. It's in Pocket, Greenhaven area. And they have a sister school in Japan, also called Matsuyama. And they are very inclusive in that aspect. I think I didn't realize it was in a school that's like not every elementary school celebrated the Cherry Blossom Festival, you know what I mean? So I'm very thankful that I got that experience growing up. They covered we went in depth in Japanese internment when I was in like 4th grade. Lots of our reading books were like had to do with that kind of stuff. And I didn't realize that was like a specific to my school kind of thing. So in elementary school it was pretty good. After it was pretty typical what you hear from Asian Americans and everywhere else. Don't really cover it as much.
So your classes in high school weren't really inclusive of Asian American experiences by and large?
Not really, I would say. I feel like there'd be like little snippets here and there because, kind of like they have to. But there's definitely way more that I've learned about just existing like online that I'm like, whoa, I can't believe we didn't talk about this in high school or stuff like that.
Well, there's this experience, right, of in these key parts of your identity, being Asian American, being queer, trans, not being included in the curriculum. So sort of systemic exclusion.
Mm-hmm.
That's a way that discrimination plays out, right?
Yeah.
Institutionalized forms of discrimination, where you just don't include the experiences of certain groups.
Yeah, but that's definitely real.
What about in college so far? Have any of your classes been queer and trans inclusive?
I would say I haven't taken that many classes that are focused in that area, so I don't think there was like a need to. I feel like in a standpoint, there's not really like a need for like statistics to go into that. You know what I mean? I feel like the classes are very focused in that way, but maybe there's always something. I guess as I'm saying it, I'm like thinking of things in my head that could be examples of representation in the classes too. But
so, what kind of classes are you talking about that you've taken that where it's not focused on queer and trans topics, it's focused on other stuff? But so, what are those classes?
Well, I was just thinking like in my nutrition classes, there's lots of male and female separation on like things like from a biological standpoint, and this is just in general, not like in a school thing. There's just not a lot of research on people who have medically transitioned and how their bodies function differently than cisgender people. Obviously, they start to function more aligning on what their like if they're on testosterone or if they're on estrogen, what their cisgender counterparts would function as. But there are still differences, and I feel like those aren't really researched in general enough. And obviously, since they're not researched enough, they're not really included in lots of these classes.
Have you taken other general ed classes, like English classes, sociology?
Yeah, I've taken a couple.
But it seems like there would be opportunities in those classes.
Mm-hmm.
More clear, I guess, clearer opportunities in some ways.
It's been a while since I've taken lots of my general education classes, since I took them in 2020, but they were all online too.
So it sounds like you haven't had many experiences taking classes that are inclusive of the queer and trans experience. Upon reflection, how does that make you feel?
To be honest, I feel like I should be like angrier about it, but I feel like since it's just so normalized, I've just come with I feel like I've been almost like forced to come to terms with like it is what it is. That's just how it is. So I feel like with it being so normalized, I've been trying to not have any feelings towards that because it's what it's always been.
sort of you're used to exclusion, like that kind of exclusion is normalized, so it's hard to have the expectation of inclusion
Yeah.
when that's never been your experience.
I think I was definitely more of an advocate for it when I was like female identifying person who liked same sex things, because like as a binary trans man, I feel like a lot of how I exist just falls into how everyone else exists and kind of just assimilate into cis men's existence. So maybe that could also be why I'm not super like, I don't know, have super strong feelings towards it, I guess. Because I feel like a large part of even my safety even is appearing as a cis man rather than appearing as a trans man. So that could also just be in my head what I'm thinking as like almost as like a safety.
So do you think it's important for the curriculum to be more inclusive, even if it's not something that, as you're saying right now, that it's something that you feel very angry about, but do you think it's important in general for the curriculum to be more inclusive?
It's definitely super important. I feel like the way I'm feeling, I shouldn't have to feel that way. I feel like if there was a lot more representation, I wouldn't think that assimilating with cisgender people, I would need to do that as a safety if we had more representation.
What do you think it would have meant to you if you did have more representation, say, in your high school classes? Like of the queer experience broadly, but the trans masculine experience in particular, would that have helped you in any way?
I only knew one trans man in my high school, and I would always think he's way braver than I am, because kids just aren't nice, you know? Especially in high school. But I think that would have helped a lot. I think just more knowledge of what trans people are in general can help everyone outside of like the school setting. I will say it's a lot better now. I'm around high schoolers a lot since I work with them. But even then, when I was in high school, wasn't that long ago. I graduated in 2020, and it was in 2018 when the other trans guy at my high school came out, and people just weren't super nice to him. So it hasn't been that long since then. It's definitely better, but it's definitely not where it should be.
When you say that people weren't nice to him, what did they do?
It was even like on a faculty standpoint, it was like getting pronouns wrong from like over like the speakers, and lots of using their old name, lots of misgendering pronouns and stuff, and mainly verbal things. It wasn't anything physical, but it's still not okay.
So what's been your experience of faculty while in college sharing their own pronouns, asking students to share their pronouns, that sort of thing?
It's been pretty good. I think most of my classes within the past 2 semesters, they've had their pronouns in Canvas and encouraged us to put our pronouns in Canvas. It's mainly that. I feel like a lot of the teachers, that I've had are inclusive in that standpoint and very encouraging to put pronouns and stuff like that.
What do you think it signals to students when professors do that in the classroom? Or why do you think that's important?
I think it's important, especially if like some students go by like they, them, any of that stuff. It's very like just to have it in like Canvas right by their name, especially like from an online standpoint, like you're replying to discussions or doing any of that stuff, you know how to refer to people. Just mainly like an inclusivity thing, you know. If they're doing it, then it makes it okay for everyone else to do it.
And so have you had the experience of being misgendered yourself in the past?
In the past, yes, it's been a while since I feel like I'm passing pretty well. But that's only when I started to come out and I didn't pass well. I feel like if I were to get misgendered to today, it would probably be with ill intent and not like a mistake, kind of like I don't think I look like a girl anymore.
So what did it feel like to be misgendered when you did have those experiences?
Well, it didn't feel good, but it was also like I lived most of my life that way, so it didn't feel entirely wrong either. It just sucked. It's not like anything I hadn't heard before, but it just hurt more if I've come out to them already and they messed up. But I get it if I haven't come out to them, they knew me before. But
I find in the interview, students tend to be more understanding than I expected around the accidental misgendering stuff. But what do you feel like people can do to avoid that kind of accidental misgendering? What can faculty do? What could students and staff, I guess, in general do to get people's pronouns right?
when you introduce yourself, I feel like it's pretty big to say, "This is my name. These are my pronouns." That's something I'm even bad at now. But when someone introduces me, like themselves to me that way, it kind of gives a friendlier approach even. So I always appreciate that, and then I do it back because I feel like it would be weird if someone was like, "Oh, I'm Gav, he, him," and then you're just like, "Oh, I'm this," and don't say it back.
It's almost like if you don't say it back, that feels more intentional.
Mm-hmm. But I feel like that's one of the main things, just upon introduction, to say your name and your pronouns.
So while in college, have you had the experience of your classes being inclusive of Asian American experiences?
It's been a while since I've taken like a super general class, like just like English or something like that. So I don't really remember. But I think it'd be a safe bet to say it was on the lesser side of inclusiveness of Asian experiences.
And I mean, I think I know the answer, but have you had the experience of classes being inclusive of the Asian American queer experience?
No, I feel like to a lot of people who write curriculum, that's a niche topic in that sense.
Well, I do think there can be an effort to sort of talk about the experiences of queer students of color, but I'm not sure that there's a specific effort by a lot of people, maybe more likely Asian American queer people, but to be inclusive of the Asian American experience in particular, you know?
I feel like a lot of Asian Americans are kind of told to be more quiet and thing in that sense, and just quietly do a good job, do your work, and then it'll be recognized.
So if the option had existed for you and it, maybe and you knew that it fulfilled general ed requirements, would you have liked to take a class like a queer studies class or an LGBTQ lit class, something like that?
Yeah, I think those things are important, and I probably would have taken one of those classes.
I mean, you kind of already said it, but why do you think you might have? Or is there anything you want to add?
No, but I think even if like I didn't choose to take one of those classes, I would really like to see it as an option at the very least. You know what I mean? Just knowing that it's there, pretty good.
So what about anything else you want to say about like classroom practices, not just the curriculum, but is there anything you can think of that faculty can do to make trans and queer students, including trans and students, in particular trans and queer students of color, feel more welcome and included in the classroom?
I feel like there's a lot of little days throughout the year too, like National Coming Out Day, just or like little Trans Visibility Week, or even like Lesbian Visibility Week, Bisexual Visibility Week, that they could just recognize maybe. I think one of the biggest things, that's the easiest thing, is just to introduce people, like introduce yourself with your name and your pronouns. I feel like that's a certain level of safety I feel when people introduce themselves that way.
So when you struggled academically, and I know you've struggled a little bit, or maybe more than a little bit at times, but why was it when you struggled academically? Like what happened?
I don't know. I feel like I'm not sure if it's entirely that, but I've just made it to be like I'm lazy. I don't think that's entirely the whole part of it, but it kind of just feels that way a lot of the time.
I mean, do you feel like that's motivation? Does that, like, are there periods that you go through where you feel less motivated?
Yeah, for sure.
And what, if you can think about specific periods of time, when has that been the case for you?
Like I said, like right after my surgery was a really big one. In high school, there was just, I don't know, maybe I was worried about other things too much and then didn't get around to it. I always felt like I could do things at the last moment and be okay. Obviously, it's not always like that, but yeah, I guess it's mainly a lack of motivation and stuff.
Is there anything that you can think of that faculty can do to help motivate you in the classroom? Or is there anything like faculty have done in the past that you can think of that has really motivated you in the class?
I can't really think of anything, to be honest. Sometimes I feel like I get behind, there's no coming back from it, and yeah, I'm not really sure.
Have there been classes where you felt more invested in what's going on in the classroom, what you're learning than other classes?
Yeah, but I think that just might be my own interest in the class, even.
Like what you're learning about?
Mm-hmm.
It's not, you can't think of like what the teacher's doing and how they're teaching the content. It's more about what the content is.
Well, there's definitely that aspect of it too. Maybe they play hand in hand, and it's how they're teaching it is what's making me more motivated to go into that class.
Okay. the last maybe couple of questions, I don't want to not ask about campus life at all. So, have you ever felt discriminated against because of your queerness or other identities while in college?
Well, in college, I've been very stealthily a trans man, and I feel like I haven't had to deal with the things that people who are the same identifying as me but don't have the passing privilege that I do have to deal with, since I do fall into, like, I just look like a guy. So I haven't really had to face any of that stuff. So I guess it goes back to what I was saying with, like, kind of the safety of being, kind of having like a cisgender attitude towards things and stuff like that, and the safety of assimilating with cis people.
And I mean, you kind of talked about this a little bit already, but do you ever, like, what's your orientation? How do you feel about being stealth? Is that something that is just sort of something you just want, or is it without qualification, or do you think is more complicated than that?
I think I'm stealth because I don't know. I feel like sometimes if I were to come out to people, I don't want them to treat me any differently, and I know a lot of the times that happens to trans people once they find out about your transness, and I don't know. I just don't like that. So, there's also, like, obviously, like, a safety reason behind it, and a bunch of other stuff. But that's kind of just how I like to exist.
So do you think the college could do anything to make trans and queer students feel more included on campus?
I feel like the resources and information about the Pride Center are pretty easily accessible to anyone who's looking for them. Not that I take advantage of them, though. Maybe it's something I should do, but that also kind of goes into how I exist stealth as a trans person. I feel not like unwelcomed, but just like a little weird going into those communities now. A little bit more so than before. Like, if I do, people would just assume that I'm gay or something. But that's okay too. I guess I can't really speak to it as much as, like, someone else in the LGBT community who needs more of those things than I do, to have those things accessible on campus. But from the other aspect of it, and another big part of my identity being Asian American, I feel like the AAPI student, like, group on campus does a pretty good job. I always get lots of their Canvas notifications of things that they're doing around campus. So,
do you feel more plugged into the AAPI community on campus?
I wouldn't really say plugged in. I just signed up for their little notifications, and sometimes I go when they're giving out free things.
So if you think about your own needs, what do you think your own needs are around services, support, events, community in general on campus?
Something that I found really helpful from the AAPI group is that they have a counselor there that can help with all the other things that the regular school counselor does, but from a lens that's a similar viewpoint as my experiences and what I've lived as an Asian American, while still being able to help me with like things like my ed plan and me with my my goals to transfer out and all that stuff too. And like a little bonus is that they generally have a less booked out schedule than the regular counselors. So that's something that I encourage all of anyone I talk to about on campus to take advantage of. I'm not sure if the Pride Center has one. Do you know?
The Pride Center here. Often, I don't know. I'm based at ARC. I'm not sure if there's a counselor dedicated to the Pride Center at SCC, actually. Yeah.
Do they have one at ARC?
Nope.
Oh.
There used to be, but the problem is if there aren't counselors who feel like very strong allies or queer themselves, or they could be queer, but they don't have the time, right? Just because they're queer doesn't mean they want to be a counselor for the Pride Center. Then it's hard to get new people hired, basically.
Yeah. I would say that that's something that was like the main reason I started going to any of the AAPI stuff in general, was just because that there's a counselor there that was catering towards that specific group of students. And I think that's, I don't know, my favorite part about it. So
yeah, I hear that the counseling department is very impacted. Like maybe there just aren't enough staff, and so it can be hard to get regular appointments.
mm-hmm.
So if you're a counselor under those circumstances, anyway, I don't know what I was going to say. Yeah, so it's good that the API, there's an API counselor.
I haven't talked to her this semester. I'm not sure if she's still here. Now that you mention it, because I remember there was a point when they didn't have one for a little bit, but in the past, when I needed it, there was one.
So at least maybe the second to last question. We'll see. Do you seek out community on campus?
Not really. Maybe I should. But I mean, I still have like some of my own friends that I talk to, but that's definitely something that I've always been open to doing. I just haven't found the time for yet. Hopefully next semester I can start doing more, and I think that'll start more with me just being on campus more and choosing to take more in-person classes rather than online classes.
So why, you said it's something that maybe you should do. Why do you think that you should do it? Do you think it would be helpful in some way?
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful just to be around other people. You know, don't want to stay inside too much and just be to myself. It's always good to see people.
And where do you think you would begin to find that community?
Maybe I'll start going more the API stuff, or I think one of the biggest things is just taking in-person classes next semester.
Okay, so I guess as a wrap-up question, what's in store for you? What are you excited about when you think about the future?
When I think about the future, I'm mainly excited to transfer out of Sac City. Not that I hate it here, just, need to move on. I'm excited for how far I'll go with, in terms of the media work that I'm doing with the Indoor Winds group that I'm currently working with. I'm excited for the high schools I teach at too. I feel like they have a big change in their culture in that band coming, so it's nice to see it play out. But I guess I'm just excited for me, what I'm doing now that I have come out. Now that I feel like I have this whole weight off my shoulders now. I feel like I'm able to just exist and do school and without having to worry about my surgery without having to worry about getting on hormones and all of this stuff. I feel like that was one of my biggest setbacks starting college, trying to do that and do school at the same time. Not that it's impossible, but it's very mentally taxing. And now that am post top surgery and post hormones and have been on them for a year, I feel like those are things that were very big in my life that I don't need to worry about as much anymore now that I've done them. So I'm excited to finally be able to put more of my focus and energy into school.
Yeah, that must feel good.
Yeah.
Okay, finally, anything else you'd like to add or questions you'd like to return to?
No, I don't think so. I feel like when I leave, I'll probably be like, oh, I wish I could have spoke more about that, but can't think of any at the moment. But I like to thank you for the conversation and the opportunity.
Thank you for taking all this time. I really appreciate the conversation.